Rain hammered the city like a punishment. Vivian Cole ran through it anyway, her lungs burning, her heels abandoned 3 blocks back, her bare feet slapping against pavement slick with oil and grime. The cold bit into her skin through her soaked blouse. Her pencil skirt had torn at some point. She didn't remember when, and blood seeped from a gash on her knee she didn't remember getting. None of it mattered. Only the running mattered. Behind her, footsteps, steady, patient. The unhurried pace of a predator who knew his prey was tiring. 3 hours ago, she'd been sitting in a conference room transcribing a deposition. Boring work, the kind that paid her rent and let her mind wander while her fingers flew across the stenotype machine. Corporate litigation, financial disputes, nothing that should have ended with a man pulling a gun and shooting the witness mid-sentence. She could still hear the sound, still see the spray of red across the mahogany table, still feel the paralysis that had frozen her in place while the shooter turned, saw her, realized she'd recorded everything. Get the girl. 3 words. That's all it had taken to end her life as she knew it. Vivian ducked into an alley, pressing herself against the wet brick, fighting to quiet her ragged breathing. Her court reporter's bag was still slung across her body. Muscle memory, years of never leaving it behind. And inside it, the stenotype's memory card held everything. The confession, the names, the admission of crimes that went far beyond financial fraud. She should throw it away, should destroy the evidence, and pray they let her live. But Sarah Chen was dead on that conference room floor, shot for telling the truth. And Vivian couldn't make that mean nothing. Footsteps at the mouth of the alley. She pressed harder into the shadows, holding her breath. I know you're here. The voice was calm, almost bored. Come out and I'll make it quick. Keep running and I'll make it last. Vivian's hand closed around the strap of her bag. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain he could hear it. The footsteps came closer. She ran, burst from the shadows, sprinting toward the alley's far end, toward the lights of the street beyond. Behind her, a curse, the sound of pursuit. She was faster than she should have been. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug. But he was gaining. She could feel him, a presence at her back, death wearing expensive shoes. She exploded onto the street and collided with a wall. Not a wall. A man. Hands caught her, steadied her, and she looked up into a face that stopped her cold. Dark hair slicked back by the rain, a jaw carved from granite, cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes. God, his eyes, the color of whiskey held up to firelight, watching her with an intensity that felt like being pinned to a board. Please. The word tore from her throat. Please, he's going to kill me. The man's gaze lifted, looking past her to the alley she'd fled from. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A coiling. A readiness. Who? I don't know his name. He killed someone. At my job. I saw it. I recorded it. And now he's... The gunman emerged from the alley. He was younger than she'd expected. Clean-cut. The kind of face you'd trust to sell you insurance or manage your retirement fund. He held his weapon low, professional, his eyes fixed on Vivian with the flat certainty of a man who'd done this many times before. Step away from the girl. His voice carried that same bored calm. This doesn't involve you. The man holding Vivian didn't step away. His hands remained on her arms, warm, steady, impossibly calm. Doesn't it? He said. Something flickered across the gunman's face. Recognition, then fear. Mr. Caruso. The gun lowered slightly. I didn't realize. This is Marchetti business. The girl witnessed something she shouldn't have. I'm just cleaning up. On my street. The man, Caruso, spoke softly, but the words carried weight like stones. In front of my restaurant. with a weapon drawn where my people can see. I meant no disrespect. And yet, Caruso released Vivian's arms, stepping forward, placing himself between her and the gun. Here we are. The girl is a loose end. Marchetti won't tolerate. Marchetti can take it up with me. Caruso's voice hardened. But you're going to walk away. Now. Before I decide that disrespect requires an answer. The gunman's jaw worked. His eyes darted, calculating odds, weighing options. Whatever math he ran in his head, the answer clearly came up unfavorable. This isn't over. He holstered his weapon, backing toward the alley. Marchetti will hear about this. I'm counting on it. The gunman disappeared into the darkness. Vivian's legs gave out. She would have hit the pavement if Caruso hadn't caught her. One arm hooked around her waist, holding her upright, while the other gestured to someone she couldn't see. A car materialized. Black, sleek, expensive. And suddenly she was being guided into the back seat, out of the rain, into warmth that made her realize how badly she was shaking. Caruso slid in beside her. The car pulled away from the curb with silent efficiency. Her teeth were chattering. Thank you. You saved my life. Possibly. He shrugged off his jacket, charcoal wool, probably worth more than her monthly rent, and draped it around her shoulders. Or possibly I've simply delayed the inevitable. That depends on what you do next. I don't understand. Those whiskey eyes studied her. Not threatening, exactly, but assessing, cataloging. Like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve. The man chasing you works for Salvatore Marchetti. If you've witnessed something that threatens Marchetti's operation, he won't stop sending people until you're dead. Caruso's voice was matter-of-fact. I've bought you time. An hour, maybe 2. After that, my interference becomes irrelevant. Then why help me at all? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, something shifted in his expression, a crack in the granite, revealing something human beneath. Because when you looked at me, you weren't afraid. His voice softened. Everyone is afraid of me, but you were afraid of him, of death, of whatever you saw in that room. And when you asked me for help, you meant it. His jaw tightened. That kind of fear is honest. I've learned to recognize the difference. Vivian didn't know what to say. She sat in his borrowed jacket, shivering, watching rain streak the windows, and tried to make sense of a world that had turned inside out in the space of an evening. What's your name? Caruso asked. Vivian Cole. Dominic Caruso. He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile, but something in his eyes warmed, just slightly. You said you recorded something. What exactly did you witness, Vivian Cole? She should lie, should protect herself, keep her secrets, find a way to disappear before this man, this obvious criminal, this person who made Gunman go pale, decided she was more trouble than she was worth. But she was so tired, so scared. And something in his voice made her believe, against all logic, that the truth might not destroy her. A murder, she said, and a confession. Names, dates, financial records, everything. It's all on the memory card in my bag. She met his gaze. I'm a court reporter. I have a near-perfect auditory memory and I can read lips. I know exactly what was said in that room, Mr. Caruso. And I know it's going to get me killed. Dominic Caruso went very still. A near-perfect auditory memory, he repeated slowly. And you can read lips. Since I was a child, my mother was deaf. I learned to catch what she missed. His expression was unreadable now, closed off, calculating in a way that made her stomach clench. That recording, he said, the information on it, would it damage Marchetti? It would destroy him. Silence stretched between them. The car moved through streets Vivian didn't recognize, carrying her further from her life, deeper into a world she didn't understand. Then here's what's going to happen. Dominic's voice carried the weight of a man accustomed to obedience. You're going to come with me. You're going to stay in my home, under my protection, until I decide what to do with the information you carry, and in exchange for that protection, you're going to help me bring down Salvatore Marchetti. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you help me? Why do you want Marchetti destroyed? Something dark moved behind his eyes. Old pain, old fury. Because 6 months ago, his men killed my brother. The words were ice. They made it look like an accident. Everyone believed it. But I know the truth, and I've been waiting for a weapon to use against him. His gaze locked onto hers. You just fell into my lap, Vivian Cole. The question is, are you brave enough to be that weapon? Vivian thought of Sarah Chen, dead on the conference room floor, of the shooter's bored voice promising to make it last, of a life she'd built that was already ashes, burned by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had nothing left to lose. Yes, she said. I'm brave enough. Dominic's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. Something like respect flickered in those whiskey eyes. Good. He settled back into his seat as the car turned onto a private drive, gates swinging open before them. Welcome to your new life, Miss Cole. Try not to die in it. The estate rose from the darkness like a dream or a nightmare. She couldn't tell which. And Vivian, clutching her bag with its damning evidence, understood that she'd just made a deal with a devil far more dangerous than the one she'd fled. But at least this devil had warm eyes. At least this devil had saved her life. For now, that would have to be enough. The Caruso estate was a fortress disguised as elegance. Vivian cataloged it automatically. Years of transcribing testimony had trained her to notice details others missed. The security cameras hidden in the ivy, the men stationed at intervals along the drive, their weapons concealed but present. The reinforced gates that closed behind the car with the finality of a vault door. Inside, the house opened into a foyer of marble and mahogany, warm light chasing away the cold she'd carried from the rain-soaked streets. A woman appeared, middle-aged, efficient, her eyes flickering over Vivian's bedraggled state without comment. Guest room in the East Wing, Dominic said. Dry clothes, food, and tell Rosa I need to see her. The woman nodded and vanished. Dominic turned to Vivian, who stood dripping on his expensive floors, still clutching his jacket around her shoulders like armor. The staff will take care of you tonight. Tomorrow, we talk strategy. Strategy? You have information that can destroy my enemy. That information is useless if you're dead, traumatized, or unreliable. His gaze swept over her, clinical, assessing. Right now, you're all three. Rest. Eat. We'll begin when you're human again. He turned to leave. Mr. Caruso. Her voice stopped him. The man at the conference room. The witness who was killed. Her name was Sarah Chen. She had a daughter. A little girl. 8 years old. She showed me pictures during lunch breaks. Vivian's throat tightened. I need to know what happens to her, to Sarah's body, to her daughter. Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. I'll find out. Not a promise to fix it, just an acknowledgement that it mattered. Now go rest. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that probably cost more than her car. The bathroom had heated floors and a tub deep enough to drown her sorrows in. Dry clothes waited on the bed, soft cotton pants, a cashmere sweater, thick socks. Everything fit perfectly. She didn't want to think about how they knew her size. Vivian showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing the rain and the fear and the memory of blood from her skin. When she finally emerged, a tray of food sat on the desk. Soup, bread, tea, and her wet clothes had vanished, replaced by a robe she hadn't noticed before. Ghosts. This house ran on ghosts. She ate mechanically, her mind churning. The memory card sat heavy in her bag, a bomb waiting to detonate. She should review the recording, should catalog exactly what she had, build a mental transcript the way she'd done 1,000 times for court. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sarah's face. The surprise. The spray of red. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and haunted. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked gardens stretching toward a distant tree line. Vivian stood at the glass, still wearing the borrowed clothes, and tried to reconcile the beauty before her with the violence that had led her here. A knock at the door. The efficient woman from last night entered with fresh clothes. Simple but expensive, blacks and creams that would fit the strange new world she'd tumbled into. "Mr. Caruso would like you to join him for breakfast," the woman said, "when you're ready." The dining room was smaller than Vivian expected. Intimate, designed for family rather than display. Dominic sat at the head of a table set for 3, reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. In the daylight, he looked different. Still dangerous, still carved from stone, but there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He wasn't the only one at the table. An elderly woman sat to his right, silver hair pinned in an elegant twist, her face a map of years and sorrows. She turned as Vivian entered, and her eyes, the same whiskey brown as Dominic's, went sharp with interest. "So this is her." The woman's voice was accented, Italian smoothing the edges of her English. "The one who fell out of the rain." "Nonna, this is Vivian Cole." Dominic set down his tablet. "Vivian, my grandmother. Isabella Caruso." Vivian wasn't sure whether to shake hands, curtsy, or flee. She settled for a small nod. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Caruso." "Sit, sit." Isabella waved her toward the empty chair. "Eat. You look like a sparrow." "Dominic, you're letting her starve?" "She arrived at midnight, Nonna. Even I can't force-feed someone in their sleep." The bickering continued as Vivian sat, and she watched with growing fascination as the fearsome man who'd faced down a gunman was gently bullied by a woman who couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds. He took it with something approaching patience, a softening at the edges of his granite exterior that made him almost human. Isabella turned her attention to Vivian as the food arrived. Eggs, pastries, fresh fruit, enough to feed a small army. "My grandson tells me you have a gift." Isabella's eyes were sharp despite her years. "Perfect memory, reading lips. These are useful things." "I'm a court reporter. It's my job to remember." "It's more than a job. It's who you are." Isabella reached across the table and patted Vivian's hand. "I know something about gifts that feel like curses, about remembering when forgetting would be easier." Something tightened in Vivian's chest. This woman, this stranger, saw more than she should. "Nonna." Dominic's voice carried a warning. "Hush." Isabella didn't even look at him. "The girl needs to know she's safe here, that we don't use people and throw them away." Her grip on Vivian's hand tightened. "My grandson is hard because the world made him hard, but he is not cruel. If he's promised to protect you, he will burn everything he has to keep that promise. Do you understand?" Vivian looked at Dominic. He'd gone still, his jaw tight, something vulnerable flickering behind his carefully constructed walls. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good." Isabella released her hand and returned to her breakfast as if nothing had happened. "Now eat. We have much work to do." After breakfast, Dominic led Vivian to a study lined with books and shadows. He closed the door behind them, and the intimacy of the space pressed against her skin. "I had my people look into Sarah Chen," he said without preamble. "Her daughter is with the grandmother. They're being watched. Marchetti's men. But they haven't been harmed. Yet. Can you... I've already arranged protection. Discreet. The grandmother won't know we're there. He moved to the window, his back to her. Marchetti doesn't hurt families unless he has to. It's one of his few rules. But if he thinks the daughter knows something, that rule disappears. Vivian's throat constricted. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He turned to face her. I need to know exactly what you have. Every word. Every name. Everything on that recording. She pulled the memory card from her bag. Such a small thing to hold so much destruction. I can do better than play it for you. She met his eyes. I can transcribe it from memory. Every pause, every inflection, every detail the recording might miss. Dominic's expression shifted, interest sharpening into something that looked almost like hunger. Then let's begin. For the next 4 hours, Vivian talked. She closed her eyes and let herself sink back into that conference room, the smell of expensive coffee, the scratch of her stenotype keys, Sarah Chen's nervous voice laying out a web of corruption that reached higher and darker than Vivian had imagined. Money laundering, bribery, murder. And at the center of it all, a name, Salvatore Marchetti. Dominic listened without interrupting. His questions, when they came, were precise, surgical. He understood the implications of every detail, could see patterns she'd missed, connections that made her stomach turn. When she finally fell silent, her voice hoarse and her mind wrung dry, he sat back in his chair and looked at her with something new in his eyes. This is enough, he said softly. This is more than enough. Marchetti thinks he's untouchable, but this... He gestured at the notes he'd taken, pages and pages of damning evidence. This is the end of him. And the end of me, if he finds out I'm helping you. He won't find you here. No one enters this estate without my permission. No one leaves without my knowledge. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intent. I know I'm asking you to trust a stranger, a man whose business is the same darkness Marchetti swims in. But I give you my word, my grandmother's word, which she offered before I could stop her, that you will be safe here, that helping me destroy Marchetti doesn't mean destroying yourself. Vivian studied his face, the hard lines, the careful control, and beneath it all, the grief he couldn't quite hide when he spoke of his brother. What was his name? She asked. Your brother. Dominic went very still. Marco? Tell me about him. Something cracked in his expression. For a moment she saw the man beneath the mask, exhausted, grieving, carrying a weight that threatened to crush him. He was better than me, Dominic said quietly. Kinder. He wanted out of this life, wanted to use the family money for something good. Build schools, hospitals, the kind of legacy that doesn't require blood. His jaw tightened. Marchetti had him killed because Marco refused to launder money through his charity work. Because my brother had principles that made him inconvenient. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be useful. The mask slid back into place, but it was thinner now. She could see through it. Help me make his death mean something. Help me tear down the man who took him from us. Vivian thought of Sarah Chen's daughter, of Marco Caruso's dreams of schools and hospitals, of the evidence sitting in her memory like a loaded gun. Okay, she said. I'll help you, but I have a condition. Dominic's eyebrow rose. You're in a position to make conditions? I'm in a position where I have nothing left to lose. She held his gaze. When this is over, when Marchetti is destroyed, I want to disappear. New identity, new life, somewhere far from all of this. And I want Sarah Chen's daughter protected too. Her and her grandmother. For good. A long pause. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Respect maybe. Or recognition. Agreed. He extended his hand. Vivian took it. His grip was warm, firm, his palm rough with calluses that didn't match his tailored suit. Then we have a deal, Miss Cole. Vivian. If she was going to bet her life on this man, he could use her name. And this doesn't make us friends. That almost smile again. The one that made him look almost human. No, he agreed. But it makes us allies. And in my world, that's often more valuable. He held her hand a beat too long. She pretended not to notice. But she did. And the warmth that spread through her chest at his touch was something she absolutely refused to examine. Not yet. Not here. Not with him. The days that followed blurred into a strange new routine. Vivian woke each morning in a bed softer than clouds, dressed in clothes that appeared without explanation, and spent her hours transforming memory into ammunition. Dominic had assembled a team: lawyers, investigators, a former federal prosecutor with a grudge against Marchetti, and they dissected her testimony like surgeons. Every name became a thread to pull. Every date became a timeline to construct. Every financial detail became a brick in the case they were building. She was useful. For the first time since Sarah Chen's blood had splattered across that conference table, Vivian felt like she was doing something that mattered. But it was the evenings she found herself waiting for. Isabella insisted on family dinners. Civilization, she called it, is maintained at the table. So every night at 7, Vivian found herself seated across from Dominic, learning the rhythms of a family she had no claim to. Isabella told stories about the old country, about Dominic's grandfather who'd built an empire from nothing, about Marco as a boy, always dreaming, always believing the world could be better than it was. She spoke of the dead with the ease of someone who'd made peace with loss, and Vivian watched Dominic's face as his grandmother wove memories around them like armor against grief. He softened at these dinners, the granite edges blurred. He laughed, actually laughed, at his grandmother's jokes. And once, when Isabella told a particularly embarrassing story about his teenage years, Vivian caught a flush creeping up his neck. "She's exaggerating," he muttered. "I never exaggerate," Isabella said serenely. "I embellish. There's a difference." Vivian found herself smiling more than she had in years. 3 weeks into her stay, Dominic found her in the library at midnight. She'd given up on sleep. The nightmares were persistent, bloody things that left her gasping, and had wandered the halls until she found the room where Marco's books still lived. Philosophy, ethics, architecture. The shelves told the story of a man who dreamed in blueprints and believed in better. "You couldn't sleep either." Dominic's voice came from the doorway, soft enough not to startle. She didn't turn. "I keep seeing her face. Sarah, the moment before—" She stopped. Some things didn't need finishing. He crossed the room, settling into the chair beside hers. In the lamplight, with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled, he looked almost approachable, almost safe. "The first time I watched someone die, I was 19. His voice was quiet, matter of fact. My father's business partner. Shot in front of me during a negotiation that went wrong. I didn't sleep properly for months." "How did you get past it?" "I didn't." His eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there, the weight he carried, the memories that never faded. "You learn to live alongside it, to make room for the ghosts without letting them consume you." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." The corner of his mouth twitched. "But the alternative is worse." They sat in silence, surrounded by a dead man's dreams. The clock on the mantel ticked away seconds neither of them wanted to count. "Tell me something," Vivian said finally. "Something real. Something that isn't about Marchetti or evidence or the war you're fighting." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Marco used to drag me to this bakery downtown, every Sunday, without fail. He said their cannoli were worth the drive, but I think he just liked the old woman who ran the place. She reminded him of Nonna. He paused. After he died, I went back. Sat at his favorite table. Couldn't eat a thing, but I stayed for 3 hours. His jaw tightened. The woman came and held my hand, didn't say a word. Just held my hand until I stopped shaking. Vivian's chest ached. This man, this dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, had sat in a bakery and let an old woman comfort him because he missed his brother. "That's the first real thing you've told me," she said quietly. "I know." His eyes found hers. I'm not sure why it was so easy. The air between them shifted, thickened. Vivian felt the pull of him, the warmth beneath the ice, the grief that mirrored her own, the impossible attraction she'd been fighting since the moment he'd caught her in the rain. "Dominic." "Don't." His voice roughened. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Not yet. Not while you're under my protection and have nowhere else to go. You think I don't know my own mind? I think you're traumatized, exhausted, and clinging to the first person who made you feel safe." His jaw flexed. "I won't be that man. The one who takes advantage. Not with you." The words hit harder than they should have. Because he was right. She was all of those things. But he was also wrong, because what she felt when she looked at him had nothing to do with safety. "Then when?" she heard herself ask. Dominic stood abruptly, putting distance between them. When he turned back, his mask was firmly in place. "When Marchetti is destroyed. When you're free. When you choose me because you want to, not because you're trapped." His voice dropped. "If you still want to then, I'll be here." He left before she could respond. Vivian sat alone in the library, surrounded by Marco's books and the echo of almost, and tried to convince herself that waiting was the wise thing to do. The attack on her mother came 2 days later. Vivian hadn't told anyone about her mother, hadn't mentioned the woman in the nursing home upstate, the early onset dementia that had stolen her mind piece by piece, the visits that had dwindled as work consumed her life. She'd kept that grief private, separate from the chaos she'd stumbled into, but Marchetti's people were thorough. The call came at dawn. The nursing home administrator, voice shaking, explaining that 2 men had tried to access her mother's room during the night. Security had stopped them, barely, but they were recommending immediate transfer to a more secure facility. Vivian was shaking when Dominic found her. "My mother." The words came out fractured. "They found my mother. She doesn't even know who I am half the time. She doesn't understand." "Where is she?" "Willowbrook. Upstate. She has dementia. She's in a care facility. She can't protect herself." Dominic was already moving. Orders barked into a phone she hadn't seen him pull out. Names, locations, instructions delivered with the precision of a general commanding troops. "She'll be moved within the hour," he said, hanging up. "I have a private facility, the best care, round-the-clock security. Marchetti won't touch her." "Why?" Vivian's voice cracked. "Why would you do this? She's nothing to you." "She's something to you." Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. "Which means she's something to me." The words unlocked something in her chest. A dam she'd built against hope, against trust, against the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone in. "I can't repay this." "I'm not asking you to." His hand rose, hesitated, then gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm asking you to let me help. That's all. Just let me help." She broke, collapsed against his chest, sobbing, all the fear and grief and exhaustion she'd been carrying finally finding release. His arms wrapped around her, carefully, like she might shatter, and he held her, while she fell apart. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're not alone anymore. I've got you." And Vivian, who'd been alone for so long she'd forgotten what anything else felt like, let herself believe him. Later, after her mother was safely transferred, after Dominic's people confirmed the facility was secure, after she'd composed herself enough to feel embarrassed about crying on a crime lord's chest, she found him in his study. "Thank you," she said from the doorway. He looked up from his papers. In the afternoon light, with exhaustion written into every line of his face, he looked almost fragile. "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. Because no one else would have done this. No one else would have cared about a woman they've never met, just because she matters to me." "Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people." He set down his pen. "My grandmother would say that family protects family, and whether you like it or not, Vivian Cole, you've become family." The word settled into her chest and took root there. Family. She'd forgotten what that meant. "Marchetti is escalating," Dominic continued, his voice hardening. "The move on your mother wasn't random. He's sending a message. He knows you're with me, knows you're helping build the case against him. The attack on the estate is coming. It's not a matter of if, but when." "What do we do?" "We prepare." His eyes met hers, burning with something that looked like war. "And when he comes, we end this. Once and for all." Vivian nodded, squared her shoulders, let the fear crystallize into something harder, sharper. "Then let's get to work." Dominic's smile was thin and dangerous. "That's my girl." The words shouldn't have warmed her the way they did, but they did anyway. The attack came on a Thursday. Vivian had learned to read the rhythms of the estate, the quiet efficiency of the staff, the rotation of guards, the subtle shifts in atmosphere that signaled something was wrong. She felt it that morning before anyone said a word. A tension in the air. Whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Dominic's jaw, tight as a wound spring at breakfast. "What's happening?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Don't." She set down her coffee cup with a click. "Don't protect me from information. I'm not fragile." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or resignation. "Our inside source says Marchetti is moving tonight. He's assembled a small army. Mercenaries. Men with nothing to lose. They're coming for the evidence." His gaze held hers. "And for you." The fear was there, cold and familiar. But beneath it, something harder had taken root. "What's the plan?" "We've prepared for this. The estate has defenses Marchetti doesn't know about. Safe rooms, escape routes, enough firepower to hold off a siege." Dominic stood, moving to her side of the table. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "When the time comes, you run. You take the tunnel to the north property, you get in the car waiting there, and you don't look back." His hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you think is happening to me, you run." "I'm not leaving you." "Vivian." "No." She stood, matching his intensity. "You don't get to save my life, and then ask me to abandon you. That's not how this works." "This isn't a negotiation." "You're right. It's not." She stepped closer, close enough to see the fear he was trying to hide beneath the command. "I'm staying. Not because I'm brave. Not because I have a death wish. But because if something happens to you while I'm running away, I won't survive it. Do you understand? Whatever this is between us, it means I don't get to leave you behind." Dominic stared at her. The mask cracked. Really cracked. And for a moment she saw everything. The terror. The longing. The desperate, impossible hope that he'd tried so hard to keep buried. "Vivian." Her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. I know. She pressed her hand to his chest, felt his heart pounding beneath her palm. I know. But we do this together, or we don't do it at all. He kissed her, not gentle, not careful. His mouth claimed hers with a ferocity that stole her breath, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her against him like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. Vivian kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear and longing and impossible hope that had been building since the night he'd saved her life. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead pressed to hers. Together, he said roughly, but if I tell you to run, you run. Promise me that much. I promise to consider it. He laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. Impossible woman. You like it? God help me, I do. The hours that followed were a blur of preparation. Vivian stayed close to Isabella, who refused all suggestions of evacuation with a stubbornness that clearly ran in the family. I was born in this house, the old woman said, loading a small pistol with practiced hands. I'll die in it if I must, but not tonight. Tonight, we win. By sunset, the estate had transformed. Men positioned at every entrance, weapons checked and rechecked, communications tested. Vivian clutched the memory card she'd transferred all her recordings to, the original evidence, the testimony that could destroy an empire, and waited for the storm. It came at midnight. The first explosion shook the east wall, followed by gunfire that shattered the night's silence. Vivian grabbed Isabella's hand and ran, following the route Dominic had drilled into her, heading for the fortified room in the estate's center. They didn't make it. 3 men intercepted them in the main hallway, Marchetti's mercenaries, dressed in black, their faces covered, their weapons trained. Isabella raised her pistol, but a shot from somewhere behind sent it clattering from her hand, blood blooming across her palm. Nonna! Vivian caught her as she stumbled. The women! One of the mercenaries spoke into a radio. We have them. They were dragged through the chaos, past bodies Vivian didn't let herself look at, through corridors that echoed with violence, until they reached the great room. Marchetti's men had taken it as a command center, and in the middle of it all stood the man himself. Salvatore Marchetti was smaller than Vivian expected. Silver-haired, well-dressed, with the polished appearance of a businessman rather than a monster. But his eyes gave him away. Cold, calculating, empty of anything resembling humanity. Miss Cole. He smiled as they were forced to their knees. We finally meet. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble. Good. His smile flickered. Brave. I like that. It's a shame you chose the wrong side. There was no choice. You murdered an innocent woman in front of me. Sarah Chen was a liability. As are you. He crouched before her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and nauseating. But, unlike Mrs. Chen, you have something I want. The evidence, the recording, the testimony you've been helping Caruso build. His hand shot out, gripping her jaw hard enough to bruise. Tell me where it is, and I'll make your death quick. Refuse. And his gaze shifted to Isabella. The old woman goes first, slowly. Isabella spat at his feet. Bastardo! Marchetti's smile turned cruel. He nodded at one of his men, who raised a gun toward Isabella's head. Last chance, Miss Cole. Vivian's mind raced. The memory card was hidden, sewn into the lining of her bra, a precaution Dominic had insisted on. But she had no weapon, no leverage, nothing but the information in her head. The information in her head. Wait. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You want the evidence? I am the evidence. I have a near-perfect auditory memory. Every word said in that conference room is stored in my mind. Names, dates, account numbers. You can destroy every recording, burn every document, and I'll still be able to testify to exactly what Sarah Chen said before your man killed her. Marchetti's grip on her jaw tightened. Then I'll simply kill you. And lose your only chance to know exactly what I've already told Caruso, what I've told the federal prosecutors, what's already been transmitted to people you'll never find. The lie came easily. She'd learned from the best. Kill me, and you'll never know how much danger you're actually in. Doubt flickered in Marchetti's eyes. Just a moment, just enough. And then the wall exploded. Dominic came through the breach like an avenging angel, covered in dust and blood, his men flanking him in a wave of controlled violence. The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire, shouting, bodies falling. Vivian threw herself over Isabella, shielding the older woman with her body, praying to whatever gods might listen. A hand grabbed her arm. She lashed out, elbow connecting with something solid, a grunt of pain, and then Dominic's voice cut through the chaos. Vivian, it's me! She looked up into Whiskey Eyes wild with fear and fury. Get her out, Dominic commanded, pushing Isabella toward one of his men. North Tunnel, now. I'm not... You promised to consider it. His hands cupped her face, steadying her. Consider it. Dominic. A shot rang out. Dominic jerked, his body twisting, and Vivian screamed as he stumbled forward into her arms. Blood spread across his shoulder, dark and terrible against his white shirt. Behind them, Marchetti stood with a smoking gun and a victorious smile. Touching, he said, truly, but this ends now. He raised the weapon again, aimed at Vivian this time, and she saw the moment of her death in his cold, empty eyes. Dominic moved. Even wounded, even bleeding, he threw himself in front of her and fired. The shot caught Marchetti in the chest, sent him staggering backward, but didn't stop him. The old man raised his gun again, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. 2 more shots, in rapid succession. One from Dominic. One from somewhere behind Vivian. Isabella, she realized, having retrieved a fallen weapon with her uninjured hand. Marchetti crumpled. The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian caught Dominic as his legs gave out, lowering him to the ground, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder. Stay with me, she demanded. Dominic, stay with me. Bossy. His voice was weak, but his eyes found hers. Warm, impossibly warm, despite the blood pooling beneath him. Always so bossy. You're going to be fine. It's a shoulder wound. Survivable, but you have to stay awake. I love you. The words came out slurred, soft. Should have said it before. In the library. Should have. Tell me later. Tears streamed down her face. You're going to tell me later when you're not bleeding out on your own floor. Do you hear me? So bossy. But he was smiling. Fading, but smiling. I hear you. Good. She pressed harder on the wound, shouting for help that was already coming, refusing to let go. Because I love you too, you impossible man, and you don't get to die before I say it properly. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. Together, he whispered. Together, she promised. And when the medics finally arrived, she was still holding his hand, still refusing to let go, still believing that together meant something worth fighting for. 4 months later, Vivian stood before a federal judge and watched an empire crumble. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, lawyers, law enforcement from 6 different agencies, all gathered to witness the final chapter of Salvatore Marchetti's reign. He'd survived the gunshots that night, though he'd never walk properly again. Now he sat in a wheelchair at the defense table, stripped of power, stripped of allies, watching as everything he'd built was dismantled piece by piece. Vivian's testimony took 3 days. She recounted every word from that conference room, her memory painting pictures the jury couldn't ignore. Sarah Chen's nervous voice, the shooter's cold efficiency, the names and dates and account numbers that connected Marchetti to decades of corruption. When she stepped down from the witness stand, the prosecutor shook her hand with tears in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." No, they did it. Her and Dominic and the team they'd assembled. Sarah Chen, whose courage in that conference room had lit the fuse. Isabella, who'd stood like a warrior queen and helped bring down a monster. All of them, together. The verdict came on a Wednesday. Guilty on all counts. Marchetti would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison, his organization scattered, his legacy reduced to cautionary tales and true crime podcasts. Justice. It tasted sweeter than Vivian had imagined. She found Dominic waiting outside the courthouse, leaning against his car with his arm still in a sling. The shoulder wound had healed cleanly. She'd made sure of that, bullying him through physical therapy the same way she'd bullied him through recovery. But he'd carry the scar forever, a reminder of the night he'd thrown himself between her and death. "It's over," she said, stopping in front of him. Almost. His good arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. "There's still the matter of that promise I made you." "Which one?" "New identity. New life. Somewhere far from all of this." His voice softened. "I told you when Marchetti was destroyed, you could disappear. Start fresh." Vivian's heart clenched. She'd almost forgotten. The deal they'd struck in those first desperate hours when she'd thought freedom meant running away from everything she'd found. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "For me to disappear?" "It's what I promised." His jaw tightened. "And I keep my promises." "That's not what I asked." Dominic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with everything he'd spent months learning to show. "What I want is for you to stay. What I want is to wake up beside you every morning and argue with you over coffee and watch you terrorize my staff with your impossible standards." His forehead pressed to hers. "What I want is forever. But that's not my choice to make." "No," Vivian agreed. "It's mine." She kissed him. Soft, sure, a promise, rather than a question. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I'm not running," she said. "I spent my whole life running. From connection, from risk, from anything that could hurt me. And then I crashed into you on a rainy street, and you made me feel something worth staying for." Her hand pressed against his chest, over the heart that had almost stopped beating for her. "I choose you, Dominic Caruso, not because I'm trapped, not because I'm scared, because you're the first person who made me believe I could have something worth fighting for." The smile that broke across his face was like watching the sun rise. "Then marry me." Vivian's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me." He reached into his pocket, awkward, one-handed, and pulled out a box she hadn't seen coming. "I was going to wait. Do something romantic. Dinner, candles, probably more Italian than you could stomach. But standing here, watching you destroy the man who tried to kill you." His voice cracked. "I don't want to wait anymore. I've spent my whole life being patient, strategic, and I'm tired of it." He opened the box. The ring inside caught the afternoon light. A simple diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, elegant and understated and perfect. "This was my mother's," he said. "Nonna kept it safe for years, waiting for the moment I found someone worth giving it to. She told me this morning that if I didn't propose today, she'd do it for me." His mouth quirked. "She was very specific about that." Vivian laughed, a wet, broken sound, tears streaming down her face. "Your grandmother threatened to propose on your behalf?" "She's a very determined woman." "I've noticed." Vivian looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the future stretching before them, complicated and imperfect and more beautiful than anything she'd dared to imagine. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. She pulled him into a kiss, heedless of the reporters still milling on the courthouse steps, heedless of anything but the man in her arms. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and when he kissed her again, she tasted joy and salt and the rest of their lives. The wedding took place 3 months later in the gardens of the Caruso estate. Small, intimate, just the people who mattered. The staff who'd become family, the team who'd helped bring down Marchetti, a handful of friends from the lives they'd lived before finding each other. Sarah Chen's daughter was there, holding hands with her grandmother, both of them safe in the new life Dominic's resources had built for them. Isabella presided over everything like a benevolent empress, directing flowers and seating and the menu with an iron will that made even the professional wedding planner defer. She's terrifying, Vivian whispered to Dominic as they watched his grandmother reduce a florist to tears of determination. She's family. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Your family now. The word still felt new, still felt miraculous. Vivian's mother was there too, dressed in silk, confused but happy, attended by the nurses who'd become her constant companions. She didn't remember Vivian most days, didn't understand where she was or what was happening. But when Vivian knelt beside her wheelchair before the ceremony, the old woman's face had softened. You look beautiful, her mother had said, reaching out to touch the white lace of Vivian's dress. Are you getting married? Yes, Mama. Is he kind? Vivian had looked across the garden to where Dominic stood with his men, laughing at something, the sunlight catching the silver at his temples. He'd caught her gaze and smiled, that private smile he saved only for her. He's everything, she'd said. Her mother had nodded, satisfied, and drifted back into whatever peaceful place her mind lived now. It was enough. It had to be enough. The ceremony was simple. Vows spoken under an arbor of white roses, rings exchanged with hands that barely trembled. When Dominic kissed her, his wife now, impossibly and wonderfully his wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers that echoed off the estate's ancient walls. You're stuck with me now, he murmured against her lips. I can think of worse fates. The reception stretched into evening, then into night, dancing beneath strings of lights. Toasts that ranged from heartfelt to inappropriate to Isabella's quiet blessing in Italian that made Dominic's eyes suspiciously bright. Vivian ate and drank and laughed until her cheeks ached, surrounded by warmth she'd spent her whole life believing wasn't meant for her. Later, much later, she stood on the terrace and watched the stars emerge. The party had wound down, the guests departed, the estate settling into peaceful silence. Dominic found her there, jacket discarded, tie loosened, looking younger than she'd ever seen him. What are you thinking? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That I almost missed this. She leaned back into his warmth. If you hadn't been on that street, if you'd turned away instead of helping, if 1,000 things had gone differently. But they didn't. His lips brushed her ear. The universe put you in my path. Or maybe you put yourself there. Either way, we're here now. That's all that matters. When did you become a philosopher? Around the time a court reporter crashed into my chest and looked at me like I could save her. His arms tightened. You made me believe I could be more than what my father left me. That power didn't have to mean cruelty. That strength could protect, instead of destroy. His voice roughened. You made me want to be worthy of the way you looked at me. Vivian turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. You were always worthy, she said. You just forgot. And I'll spend the rest of my life reminding you. She kissed him softly. A promise, a benediction, the beginning of something that would last. They stayed on the terrace until dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for a future neither of them had expected to have. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But they would face them together. This court reporter and her crime lord. This woman who'd run from a gunman and found safety in the arms of a man the world called dangerous. Some love stories begin with chance meetings. Some begin with crisis and fear. Theirs began with rain and terror, and a moment of recognition. Two people who saw something real in each other's eyes and chose not to look away. Vivian had spent her whole life remembering things she wanted to forget. Now, finally, she had something worth remembering forever. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.